Welcome to the Making Sense of Martech podcast. I'm Jacqueline Freedman.
And I am Juan, Mendoza.
And this is Office Hours. And we cut through the noise and discuss the latest and greatest in Martech.
And what an amazing first week, Jacqueline. We have launched and resurrected Making Sense of Martech. We had email campaigns, we had UTM links, we had everything you could think of around our launch. The feedback has been overwhelming. I mean, I've got so many people emailing me every day at the moment, congratulating us on the podcast, looking at also sponsoring the podcast. But yeah, it's been fantastic to see.
Yeah, agreed. It's been definitely an unexpected response. Obviously, you could always hope for it, but you never actually know what's going to happen. And also, the most constructive feedback was, my microphone sucked. And you are correct. And so I have since purchased a very fancy mic. So hopefully the audio is better, but there's a caveat and not so great part of it. I've recorded all of the interviews through beyond the end of this year already, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and overachiever. So I apologize that it will go in and out in terms of when and where the microphone will sound great, but just know moving forward, it will be better. And I appreciate the constructive feedback.
Oh, yeah. So if you want to get on the hot seat with Jacqueline Freedman, you're going to have to wait until January, guys. But it is quite exciting because I think for us, we've launched this podcast as a way to really engage the enterprise marketing technology decision maker and the people that are really driving the strategies around technology. And yeah, just our initial stats are blown up. People from all over the world are listening. And yeah, some of the folks that have reached out, both wanting to be interviewed, but also just curious to ask more and learn more, has been a little bit overwhelming this week. So if you have sent us an email, please accept our apologies as we take a few days to get back to you. We're not used to this amount of attention. So thank you so much.
But Juan really likes it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I love the attention. Don't worry about that. But thank you so much for all the love. We're really excited to continue this podcast. So, and other great news, our next event is coming up, Martech World Forum in London. Really excited for it. It's on the 9th and 10th of September, right in the middle of London, right near Marble Arch in Hyde Park there. Really excited. Love to see you there if you're looking for a conference to come and hang out with a bunch of enterprise Martech execs. But we're actually doing something a little bit special. Jacqueline, what are we doing?
Wow, there's a couple of things. One of which, there is going to be a VIP dinner for a very select few of brand side folks. So if you're a marketer at an enterprise, we want you to come because we want to have the conversations that we're all having. It's just rarely do you get to commiserate amongst your colleagues, your peers, and realize everyone is dealing with the same things and nuances and learn tips and tricks. And it's really exciting. But what else are you excited for, Juan?
Well, I'm just excited for the brands that are coming down and sharing what's working in their marketing technology programs. So we've got Sharon Broad. She's a global CRM leader at Virgin Active. She's talking about creating hybrid teams and succeeding in the future marketing world. James Taylor at HSBC. He's going on about their journey towards taking full control of their data. Massive global blank, really interesting. And then we have Diana Cosma. She's a global director of customer data products at Condé Nast. So she's talking about the AI reckoning, the new Martech enablement framework for business growth. So we've got just really juicy, meaty topics around how enterprise leaders are actually driving results with Martech in all different ways. Teams, data infrastructure, data technology, and then AI and sort of new technology as well. So really excited for it. Come check it out. It's on the 9th and 10th of September. Let's dive in to our first topic for today, which is I got in trouble again last week, Jacqueline. I keep getting in trouble on LinkedIn. I think at some point you're going to have to take my logins away, or someone in the company has to take them away.
I like the sound of that, but at the same time, you've got good thoughts and opinions that deserve to be out into the ether, even if they're a bit of a hot take.
Oh, that's nice. Well, let me read you my last hot take, okay? I'm just going to read this straight off the page. You ready? So, overheard from an enterprise marketing technology exec today, so last week at some point, quote, "My goal is to spend as little time as possible thinking about my vendor partnerships and as much time as possible thinking about our business." I don't think a lot of vendors get this when they deal with the enterprise. They don't want to be at your product launch. They don't want acute account health catch up. Your keynote thought leader has no chance of getting a meeting. They certainly don't want to be haggling over price increases. A VIP luncheon isn't the perk you think it is. Sometimes it's just about the commercial impact of managing a relationship that gets in the way of the work. Let the tech speak for itself. If you need a bajillion customer success managers to get an email out, then you have a big, big problem. Now, I posted that and it caused a bit of controversy. I had a lot of technology vendors saying, you don't understand. We're an extension of the teams that we work with. They need us. They need guidance. They need strategy. We deliver it. You're missing the point here. A vendor that is basically saying that they want to minimize those partnerships, must have everything sorted and have a perfect world, and they don't need any help at all. But Jacqueline, what's your take on this? Because I think it's a very mixed response. Some folks were saying this was exactly it, right? Like brands want to focus on their business. They're not there to build and set up technology, like, so what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's tricky because there is value in having your vendor as a partner. However, you want them for their expertise, not to do the job for you ultimately. So, yes, upon implementation, it's definitely helpful if they're the ones with the expertise to help you implement. However, you also want to know how to use these tools. That lack of institutional knowledge is what I've seen time and again, both when I've been in-house, but also with clients. That is the Achilles heel. They lose one person who knows all the details. There was no documentation. If you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what we've done and what you failed at, how are you going to make those programs even better? And so I think there's an over-reliance on vendors as it relates to quarterly
Mm,
business reviews, all of those things. That's not to say they're not valuable. It's just the
mm,
way in which it's being in practice and the way folks are using it right now. It
mm,
is surface level. It is unhelpful. And
mm.
I want a vendor who actually is a partner, meaning they're an extension of my team and
Yep.
they are bringing real value
Mm,
and giving pointers and showing expertise. Oftentimes, when I've worked with vendors, I know more than they do about their product. And that is a problem because as a practitioner, you can go from company to company as you leave and leapfrog around, but you're still using the same tool. However, on the customer success time side, customer support side, you'll only be there for a few years, maybe, and you'll move on to the next and you have to become an expert in that. But you can't really
mm,
become true expert if you only have a year or 2 years in a tool. You have to
mm,
really be hands-on using it. So
mm.
that's my take. What are your thoughts?
I would see that there are positives and negatives with the vendor extension of your team type concept. On one side, I think the quote stands up by itself. The business is there to serve their customer, not to set up technology, number one. So for technology vendors selling in, I would say that if it's all this obfuscation and all these different partner things that need to happen and all this sort of hand holding, there's a fundamental problem with the technology. Yes, enterprise organizations are complex. Yes, the problem often isn't it the vendor there, right, in terms of that complexity. But in itself, we have our own partnerships and our relationships with our technology vendors, and they often just get in the way. We hire a whip crack, awesome, smart person that can actually just come in and build things with us, with our technologies. And then that CSM just often just gets in the way, So like they'll catch up. Oh, we took a call, it was hilarious a few weeks ago, where they said, oh, okay, you guys are not using these features, but you're using these features instead. They said, duh, because we don't need the 20 features that we purchased, but we can't customize it. So it's like CSM scratching their head going, well, okay, do you want to use them more? And we're like, no, we don't need to. So, often those things happen where, it's just a bit of cluelessness around what is actually needed. But on the other side, I mean, a lot of enterprise marketing technology came at a time when there were no digital skills. There was no person on the
Correct.
other side of that call where there was they can just call out the nonsense and go, this is what we need. This is what we need to build, and get going. I'll give you one example. So we have this problem with a customer recently. We're sitting down with them. They're a, $15 billion company and large organization, very complex. But Salesforce came at a time when they had no digital skills or real maturity in the business. And so Salesforce themselves built their entire API infrastructure from Salesforce Marketing Cloud down to all their downstream tools. They want to shift to next generation technology, particularly around Marketing Cloud and marketing automation, but they can't because it's a black box. They don't know actually how all of those APIs work. They have no idea. And so
It's so
that
depressing.
it is depressing, and it's a real sticking point where companies now they have the maturity and the skills, and now we've been through sort of a good 15, 20 years now of this digital transformation. They're stuck because the vendor has ingratiated themselves so much and meshed themselves so much into the business. Don't get me wrong, that's a great way to minimize churn. If your customer literally cannot churn, that is a fantastic business strategy. Don't
It
get me
sounds
wrong.
a bit more like a leech situation, in my personal
Yeah,
opinion.
exactly. Yeah, a leech, right? Last week we talked about avocados. Now we're talking about leeches. But and the same,
Sorry.
but the same side. But the reality is that 70% of digital transformations fail. McKinsey said that 67% of Martech goes unused. That's from Gartner. A recent 2024 CMO survey said 50%, half of CMOs are disappointed with the payoff of Martech investments. Why? It's because a lot of the technology that is coming into enterprise still needs a lot of that specialist skill set that really only the vendor can provide. So it's a bit of both. I would say that, there is a dichotomy there between, well, is this really the vendor trying to leech themselves into the business? Or is this really genuinely the enterprise brand wanting help, needing help, and then the specialists that understand this technology, understand how it works with several other companies and their other clients? You could see there's value in those partnerships. But at the same time, marketers are not here to set up technology. In fact, I would go so far to say if your job is really just setting up technology and you're in the marketing department, you're missing something, because it's
Ouch.
about,
That's my favorite thing. And that's what I would do. That there's the wing
yeah,
of the
yeah,
marketing technologist MarOps that I always see it as a kind of a church and state. You have your
mm,
marketers, but then you have the technologists who are integrating the systems and working with the engineers and product. And it is a distinctly different skill set. Doesn't mean you can't, go between the two. But
mm,
to your point, the tools should be self-serve enough
mm,
to get a certain point done.
mm, mm.
And where you have that implementation support is really the things that very few have knowledge of, whether it's deliverability, actual best practices on data structuring and working with the data engineer for that, and just like specialized components. I mean, there is such value of, hey, we can give you a demo of your actual data in 5 minutes versus let me show you this splashy Figma or demo of things. And, there's smoke and mirrors. It's deeply disappointing, but also I hope it's the kick in the butt that enterprise companies and really all MarTech vendors realize they need to have a better solution and better product in order to sustain growth and
Yeah.
happy customers, to say the least.
We recently in our business was looking at some data enrichment tools. We came across this really great product that used AI to sort of spot all of the missing data in our CRM. And I think increasingly, we're coming out of this phase of clunky, software that you have to have coding skills to use. Like AI is the ultimate no code. There's another layer here which is worth considering, which is, I think the trend will be less vendor partnerships and less percentage of your team, just because AI, the promise of AI is that the technology just works. The reason you need all these people in your business because the technology isn't working in some way. And often that has a skills gap, there's a talent gap to make that happen. But the AI flattens that talent gap, I think. And so that's like, if I would say anything, that original quote that we want to minimize our time on vendor partnerships and spend more time in our business, I think that quote will become more and more true with the age of AI tooling and the ease and accessibility of tools and technologies. You don't need to write SQL anymore. You can write prompts, as an example.
Okay, but who's going to be paying for certifications to ensure they're considered experts? What goes wrong there? I digress.
I look, vendor certifications, I'm a big believer. I love them. It gives
I
you a good
am
grounding.
not.
You're not very interesting. I got my best education. I came from technology vendors. So in the sense that, because there's not really, like, if you wanted to learn a CDP, you're better off going to a CDP that's actually has a course than something that's a little bit more agnostic. You're better off going deep into one tool in the beginning instead of, getting a high level view. I've had a comparison there, like a CDP course from a vendor and then from like a third party, and the third party was just too superficial for me. Like with
Interesting.
by the vendor, you go deep into the tech, you're building a use case with their technology in a sandbox. Awesome in that regard. So in the future, why do we need certifications in the first place? Like, if the
Yeah.
promise is real, and that is the promise, that the technology you'll be able to use it with basic skill sets and not having to have this really hyper specialized knowledge or skills, then it really does flatten what the role of the vendor. The vendor is just
Yeah.
often just to provide the technology.
I will
So
say I've made it this far in my
yeah,
career with 0 certifications, and that's been both by happenstance and by purpose. Didn't work for companies who knew to even do a professional development budget, and or got to the point where I knew the tool better than every customer success support, you name it, and then I just would carry on to the next one and do the exact same thing, and it's just trial by fire and practice. And so I'm a
yeah.
staunch believer in you can learn far more than a course by just
Oh
doing
yes.
it.
Oh yes, very true. Speaking of trial by fire, let's jump to our next topic, which
Oh
is
man, yeah, it's a big
the
one.
the AI bubble and disillusionment. Now, MIT came out with a big report. It's caused a bunch of controversy in the marketplace. They're saying that only 5% of generative AI deployments based on their study are successful. So that's companies
That's
using generative AI
bad.
in some capacity. And it's not that bad. Let me read you a quote. Benedict Evans, he's a prominent analyst in the tech world. He said this, I thought it was hilarious in response to all this controversy. He said that I'm hearing disturbing rumors that quick pilots of a brand new and very immature technology do not always produce medium slam dunk successes. and, you know,
Oh, no kidding.
and, and no kidding. I am not surprised by 5% at all.
Yeah. I mean, I would have hoped for maybe 15, but and I said it in our previous office hour episodes, it's a bubble and everyone's in their 1 year POC and you're lucky if you get 2 years. And if not, you're not going to be in business for very long.
Mm.
And ultimately, what really needs to happen is the economics of leveraging AI. Right now, it is just very expensive per call, per API call. It adds up. And if you're looking for incremental increases in revenue, like it eats away at that. Versus if you're doing really big swings that could go horribly wrong or horribly right in the best way, that's how you're really going to be able to have a successful deployment. But I think for the most part, it's not working. But it will eventually, but costs have to come down and also probably macroeconomic conditions have to change a bit too.
Yeah, there's a very, very ancient saying: when you chase the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And what that means,
Oh, I
and
don't know that one. I like it.
what it means is that basically you're grasping at nothing, right? Try to chase the wind. You try and capture it in a bottle. You can't. Hype is almost exactly the same. When you have companies, when you have all these AI experts with, all of a sudden there's like a million LinkedIn AI experts. You get all these
Can we just
people,
like get rid of expert and guru from our vocabularies? Because pretty much if someone immediately says that I'm a guru in X, I'm an expert in this, I just kind of shrug and laugh and move on to the next person.
I
Personal
get angry.
bias.
I don't shrug. I get angry and try and criticize them. But horses for courses. But I guess the thing here is that the Silicon Valley industrial complex around hype, the integration between media, the progenitors of hype, social media, the distributors of hype, and then the technology companies and the VCs behind them. It's such a well-oiled machine now, where one use case, one thing that generates a significant outcome, or even just an idea, gets all this hype and drives all this internal pressure in the enterprise. But I would say that for us, even in what we see day to day, we're not seeing a lot of successful case studies in the Martech world around AI. I'm not seeing a lot of explosive AI projects that are driving huge amounts of revenue. In fact, a lot of technology companies come to us and ask, hey, what do you think about our go-to-market for AI? And I said, hey, draw a dot, put a dot on this page, this strategy, this AI strategy. I've put one dot on the area that is actually driving revenue, and they can't, because it's still new, it's still working it out. And all of that is quite exciting and fine. But I would say that going back to this study, there was a common thread between homegrown and integrating directly with an LLM. And there was a big difference there. So the folks that have an internal team that have already been working on this for quite some time, they're more successful. The companies that are just picking up an enterprise ChatGPT subscription and then trying to make it work, as seeing that, no, it's not going to work like that. It's not just about buying software and making it work. It's actually about the transformation, the mindset within the business to make it work. It's interesting. I'll give you one really good example of this. We recently did a case study with Rappi. So they are a version of like Uber Eats or DoorDash for Latin America. And the head of Martech there, Satya, he basically set up this AI strategy to complement their existing AI decisioning. So they have a very popular app. They've got millions of customers on the app every day. Basically, they had all these different offers and deep links and advertising campaigns going out every single day, thousands of them. And what was happening was that there was all these breakages in the experience. So someone would see an ad on Facebook or on Instagram or something, they'd click through, and then the deep link into the app would break. And this would be happening, and they couldn't really measure or figure out what was going on. And so,
No, that's
yeah.
heartbreaking.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. And they knew that because they were losing they're like hundreds of thousands of dollars a day in revenue just by these broken journeys. So what they did, which is fascinating, they employed a company called Mobot, which is, they basically have a massive factory filled with robotic fingers and cameras. This is going to sound weird, but basically what they did
This
was
sounds a little futuristic and
yeah,
terrifying. It's
Yeah, it's a little bit outside the LLM word, but stick with me. So it's an AI system that uses robotic fingers and then computer vision and an AI model to test every single version of the app as it's being released, as new campaigns go out. And they've got thousands of these robots. And basically, the computer vision would test it on an actual device, and then a robotic finger would be pointing and clicking at the elements of the website page. And over that initial program of work, so they just did a pilot, like just a month, I think it was, and it only cost $5,000 to run the pilot, but they got $150,000 in return purely just by targeting some key journeys and using computer vision to fix those. And then it actually uncovered where all the broken journeys were. So the AI system there, machinery, computer vision, and then a robotic finger actually drove incremental returns from their ad spend. So much so that the budget went out of product, actually went into the marketing team for that technology. Now, to me, that's a great example of a company thinking really clearly about how they can solve problems with AI, and I would say for large consumer brands, you see that a lot, like the amount of QA that needs to happen over an experience that changes 1,000 times a day is unfathomable. So you do need AI to actually enable that and to manage it. So you can get what I see, right? Like there's things there that can
There's
really work,
opportunities.
but there's transformational change. And the only transformation that can actually happen there is through your team thinking differently about using technology. And that's a great example.
Yeah. Anytime someone is asking, how do I implement AI into my tech stack? My immediate question is no. What needs improvement? What gaps? What opportunities do you have ahead of you? So then as a result, we can figure out maybe AI can be plugged in. But the Rappi example is so helpful because there are a lot of large companies, not to mention just regular, mid-market to SMBs that don't do UAT. They don't do QA in the way they should. And it's not only just as important as your customer support, but you literally don't have a technology that works if you do not make it work for every customer. And so if anything, it's an accessibility requirement to an extent. If your customers are not able to access it, why did you build it? What was the point of this journey? And where was the rigor in QA? So I think it's really great and helpful and achievable example. 5K is a drop in the bucket for so many companies. And the results speak for themselves.
It's an amazing outcome. And if you extrapolate that over, like that was just a very small segment running for just a month, right? They extrapolate that out. You're talking millions of dollars in incremental revenue from ad spend just by fixing broken journeys. It's boring. It's not the exciting, sexy
It's not
stuff
the
that
sexy stuff.
OpenAI.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the crazy stuff you see from Microsoft and OpenAI and all the gurus on LinkedIn, but it's stuff that works. I think for marketing, I think this is what we're starting to see is that at the back end of business, our logistics, operations, customer support, the stuff that doesn't make the headlines is where all the revenue is coming from in terms of AI improvements and where all the productivity improvements are coming from. But in marketing, it's art. It's the flashy stuff that doesn't seem to be as revenue generating as you think it is. So again, very interesting time. I think the controversy has definitely damaged the stock prices of some companies, especially my MIT study. Even Sam Altman last week, according to Ed Zitron, Sam Altman, by the way, Ed Zitron's got a fantastic newsletter called Where's Your Ad At? Very pessimistic on tech, however, very good on reporting. And he's saying that even Sam Altman's recognized as a bubble here, and there are going to be companies that get hurt. There is a very Silicon Valley-esque thing going on here where the bubble and the hype drive all this investment in momentum. And then out of that, it's kind of like a forest fire, right? The collapse of the bubble decimates a bunch of companies, but only the best ones kind of remain. It's very Darwin, like Darwinism, where it's like the Ubermensch or the strongest only survive. I think that's what Sam was trying to say
Survival
there.
of the fittest, for sure. So speaking of disillusionment, that really does tie into Gartner's hype cycle. And they've even recently said that we are entering the trough of disillusionment. And that 5% number makes so much more sense. And from what they say, the low point is really expected next year. And then it'll eventually just become a productivity tool, which I feel like that's what we're seeing in the space. There's a few outstanding examples, like the Rappi one. There's an upcoming interview episode on the hot seat where we've got a really great fashion brand that is walking us through how they've implemented it successfully. But those are only really two substantial examples that are not just incremental productivity and efficiency gains, which can be great for certain manual processes. But to your point, marketing is art and there's science, but it's a lot of art and it's not as easy to make things cooperate as a result.
Very, very well said. Moving on to the Martech's pricing proxy problem. It's a bit of a tongue twister. We're talking about composable CDPs and the shift around how CDP infrastructure is being priced. And we're seeing this really interesting feedback from our members and our customers around this, around saying, well, now we're starting to see that the way CDPs used to price themselves has changed a lot. But what's actually happening here, Jax?
I think folks are finally realizing I shouldn't double pay for my data. And also, I shouldn't silo my marketing data from the greater business. And so for me, I find it actually the growing pain that's been necessary for so long. The amount of times I've been on, I would say, a traditional CDP demo, and I leave the demo saying, I have no idea what I just saw. And this is my stuff that I know. And as a result, all of that just like murkiness and lack of clarity means not only are people confused why they're paying a significant portion of money, but also they don't actually know what it's doing. And it's intriguing because I know, one, it's really difficult to price all these types of things. I mean, there's entire pricing teams sometimes at different companies. And so Treasure Data has a new solution. Do you want to pick it
That
up?
solution is actually quite interesting. So what they're saying is effectively cost for compute. So data storage, data sent between one app to another. They're actually killing that. So they've got a no compute pricing model, which is pretty different from most CDPs. Most CDPs are pricing things around compute, around storage. That's actually how they make a lot of money. Their traditional CDPs is just really the data storage component in their business model. But Treasure Data has come out with this idea to go, nope, we're going to only charge you for two things: the amount of customer profiles you have in your CDP and the amount of behavioral events that are triggered when a customer actually does something on your website. So the rationale goes something like this. You as a marketer want to see the most value coming out of your data. So personalization, segmentation, analytics, all that stuff leads to revenue and outcomes. However, if you're paying just for really infrastructure costs, that doesn't ladder up into an actual tangible ROI for marketing. And so Treasure's bet is that if you price it based on the amount of customer profiles in your account, and also the amount of events that are firing off and that profile that's enriching. The story goes that it's actually building up that data asset. The money that you're spending with Treasure Data would be investing into enriching that customer profiles, that data set over time. And then theoretically, you'll be getting more value out of that data set through everything I just said, the way to activate it, the campaigns that go out, the personalization strategies, and then the analytics and insights as well. So that's sort of the core of what they're doing. I have a small critique on this one thing. I would
I
say that
can't
it is still.
You
I
have
would
a
say,
critique? What?
yeah, wow, yeah, newsflash. But I would say that the
Big
main
banner.
problem, the main problem with this pricing model is that it does take a bit of a mental shift in the enterprise to see their data as an asset. I believe it or not, most companies don't think about their customer data as an asset. They think about it as just numbers, as churn, as fodder to generate revenue. But the smart companies think about it as an asset, like you would as a portfolio manager or a VC or an investor, to go, okay, I've got all these different assets and they're accumulating in value. For a company, your data is your asset.
You're giving me terrible premonitions of like Palantir owning everyone's data, and that is their asset and only business model. So you're giving me some doom and gloom, but I've never really had that official like through line of seeing it as your company's primary asset. It's always been important, but I've never phrased it that way in my head. And I really like that concept because it's understandable, especially amongst all of the folks we're working with and we talk to. We're all in tech in some way, whether it is our tech or you work at a tech company, it depends. And if you're able to shift your thinking, your mindset around what your data is and realize the significance and importance of zero and first party data, screw the third party data. It only has firmographic help. And even then, it's dicey. But I really appreciate that phrase and it's changed my perspective. So thank you for changing my perspective on something I didn't know existed.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because every asset, you buy a house, that's an asset. You have to maintain it, or the walls will start to cave in.
Don't remind
And
me. It's so expensive.
exactly. When we bought our house, we put up a new fence, we painted the house, we bought a new couch, we set up a projector, we did all these things in our house. And it's exactly the same with the house of your customer data. You want to maintain it. It costs money to maintain it. But guess what? as that asset grows, the value grows because you have more marketable customers, less churn, you can get more value out of those customers. It really is such a core concept. And I think that's what Treasure Data is banking on, is that brands increasingly see their customer data as an asset. But my critique is that most companies don't see that today. The CDP alignment to ROI has always been tricky because they don't send emails. They don't put a website personalization on the website. They don't do things that they can actually see the outcomes straight away. And the other categories of MarTech that do those things, they can go and say, we launched this campaign, it was personalized and it drove this uplift. And then they go back to the execs and say, hey, look, we're generating significant returns out of our investment. With the CDPs, they're just upstream of that. And so, I would actually suggest that companies think about more about the data activation, pricing around that. So the data that comes from your CDP and is activated downstream into the tools, every time that's activated, then you're clipping a ticket in some form or another. But, there are different mental models and different ways in which CDPs are priced. I just think that this one is particularly interesting because it's focusing more on the customer profile and that data asset concept. Again, fascinating. And there's going to be a lot more change in the space, guarantee it.
Oh yeah, I'm still thinking about the analogy of thinking of your entire tech stack and just your data as the house that you purchased, because there's three things you can do, and didn't know I was going to go all Martha Stewart here, but there's three things you can do to increase the value of your house. It is upgrade the bathroom, upgrade the kitchen, and landscaping. I always consider Martech the plumbing of every company, whether they realize it or not. It is the most complex because you have to bring the product analytics, you have to bring in the orders, the revenue, all of this into one place versus just one focus, one primary, did this increase lift on X? That's so without the context of the greater business. And so if you only upgrade the landscaping, that's great. You're going to get an ROI there. However, people care about their bathroom. They care about the kitchen, and we're plumbers. Ultimately, we're back of the house. We are just making sure the integrations sing and there's no leaks, there's no issues. They call us when something goes awry. There's very few thank yous usually as well, especially if something all of a sudden just bursts and leaks, and they blame it on you versus sometimes, sites go
Yes,
down,
it's
certain things happen.
very hard to sell a house with bad plumbing, especially if someone coming to look at their house or turn the tap on, nothing comes out. So,
Or it comes out brown.
yeah, it comes out brown.
That would talk about, we'll bleep it out, but talk about list right there.
yeah. Open up your CDP and turn the tap on your CDP. Only brown water comes out. You don't want that, right? And I think that's what Treasure Data is trying to head off. But moving on to something a little bit more funnier, a hot take of the week. I love this hot take. We call it Pepsi versus Wendy's. So there's this group called Higgsfield Product. Basically, what they do is AI videos. So they do LLM videos. That's something that people are experimenting with. So the tweet went like this. So Pepsi took a $57 million campaign and made it for $9 using the Higgsfield product, right? And then it's got the demo of the video. The video is the most AI slop stuff you would ever see, right? It's just terrible. But the entire Detroit team gone, the ad world forever, right? That's what the post said. And then Wendy's comments underneath. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh yeah, doom and gloom, right? Wendy's comments very simply, that was a waste of $9.
Wendy's always wins here, and I tout it often, but social media teams, they deserve a raise because that is really quick and really smart and very true. And
100%.
this is where a great example of internal hurdles and bureaucracy gets in the way of actually going to market and doing what you need to do when you need to do it. And just think about if they had to wait 24 hours for approval to say waste of $9 versus as if you're just on your phone, just I got a thought, and you post it.
Yeah.
And so whoever is at Wendy's who did that, you deserve that raise.
We love the people at Wendy's. They're very, very funny. And they've been like that for years, right? Like just the jovial,
They set the standard.
Yeah, the absolute meme lords over there. It's very funny what they do on Twitter. But I guess it goes back to this point is that we're seeing these hot takes. We're seeing this like, oh yeah, you can do a $57 million ad campaign for $9. And you know what I actually think? There is a coordinated campaign between a lot of tech companies and other media folks. They're basically boosting those kinds of posts, right? Like social media manipulation is not a new thing, and around the AI bubble, we're seeing this, right? Where there's a lot of targeted, coordinated campaigns. Basically, folks saying, you can do all this stuff for $9, creating all this controversy. Basically, all that's doing is raising the profile of AI tools. That's all it's doing, regardless of the controversy. It reminds me a lot, actually, of a group that I criticized earlier this year, which basically went out and said that you had billboards all over San Francisco. They basically were saying, stop hiring humans. You don't need to hire humans anymore. Just you can hire an AI SDR, and that the AI SDR can go and do your sales for you. But what they're deliberately doing there is it's just injecting controversy into the media conversation. And I think that Wendy's is just hilarious in that this is just stupid, guys. Like basically
Yeah.
that's what Wendy's saying there. But
It's
onto
this
something.
era's clickbait. It's our clickbait version of this in between physical and digital component now. It's not just headlines and YouTube videos. All right, we had to add in an inspiration segment this week, mainly because I couldn't get Juan to shut up. This whole week, he wouldn't stop talking for the past, 10 to 14 days about this article that Pawan Verma at Bupa wrote on customer decisioning and who gets to define customer decisioning. Is it the vendors? Is it the customers? And I know, Juan, you've got a lot of comments here, and I'll hand it over to you.
So this essay basically slapped me in the face. I thought it was one of those brilliant enterprise perspectives on AI decisioning, what Pawan Verma calls customer decisioning in his newsletter, Martech Square. This whole idea of AI decisioning it's a lot of hype around it right now. And he just gets to the core of like what is actually going on in this space. So I'm going to read you 4 quotes about this essay that blew my mind, okay? And then I'll let it speak for itself. The first one is, for most practitioners, the real questions about AI decisioning, what constitutes good decisioning, how it should be architected, and how to govern it responsibly remain unanswered. Completely agree with that. What good looks like is an unanswered question in this space. When maturity is defined by product adoption, the complexity of true decisioning capability is flattened. And this is what we're seeing, is that the technology vendors want us to believe that adopting their technology means maturity. It actually doesn't. There's a big iceberg underneath that. The third quote, the history of CDPs show how vendor-led definitions can stall innovation for years before the market corrects itself. And this is, again, just speaking to this idea that AI decisioning should be led by the brands, not by the vendors. And when the brands start to get together and think about the definition of AI decisioning, I think better things happen because it comes from hardware and experience. And then my most favorite quote is, quadrants compare vendors. They do not define disciplines.
I can't imagine why you like that one.
I like that one because the quadrant is kind of the best we have around the tech category.
Yeah.
It really is. It's like, all right, AI
For now.
decisioning,
For now.
data analytics, CRM, all these things. That is the definition of, say, an entire discipline. It's not. It's actually just a marking out of the vendors in that space. And so very interesting comments from Pawan Verma's essay. Definitely go check it out. It'll be in the show notes.
It's a good read and a good reminder. And for me, my brain immediately is like, let's think of solutions. And this is where I think there's both a benefit of CABs, customer advisory boards within companies, but also like in third places outside of the specific vendor, outside of your specific company. It's talking amongst your peers and really requesting, but demanding more than anything, this new definition, the actual definition. And definitions can be really hard. And if we continue to let vendors choose the definitions, we will continue to have confusion. We'll continue to not actually know what they mean. I mean, I can ask 10 people what a CDP is and I get 10 different answers. That's a problem. And speaking of CDPs, we have a question of the week from someone anonymously about CDPs. So I feel this pain. I'm on my 3rd CDP in 7 years at my company. They've failed all for very different reasons, and I'm starting to doubt the value of the tech overall. What's your best argument for CDP tech and keeping it? That's tough.
It's a great question. We're starting to see that where there's like a second and third wave of CDPs coming in. Those acquisitions happen in different ways. It could be the new exec comes in and buys all the tech they're used to. It can mean that the technology just doesn't work, but it can be very frustrating being on your 3rd customer data architecture in 7 to 10 years. So firstly, I want to say that's frustrating. I feel your pain. Not fun. But what I would say is that CDPs play a role in enabling marketing to understand their customers better, I would say, and be able to activate on those understandings. So I would say stick with it. It's probably more a reflection of the company that you work at, where they're on the 3rd, than perhaps the tech category itself. But we've seen, I've worked with companies that had a CDP and have seen incredible outcomes. I've been working with them. Some CDPs I've seen, they've been working with them for 15 years. So my only advice is to go and actually ask those people, come to one of our events or even have a chat with us about how other companies are actually be able to play the long game with various CDPs, because it is possible. And we've literally seen companies being with one CDP before it even was called a CDP for more than 15 years. And so it is possible to have a very long-term relationship. And actually bookends our conversation at the start of this episode about,
Sure
about
does.
those partnerships as well. But, I would say that have a think about, is it the reflection of the internal dynamics of your business, or is it the category itself that's not working for you? If it's a category, then try and unpick if it's a right business model to have a CDP. Sometimes CDPs just don't work for certain business models. If it's within your internal situation, understand the political dynamics at play that's actually causing these technology changes and what's causing that. I think spend more time analyzing your own business, understand where you're at, and then go and learn from others about how they actually are more successful with their acquisitions here.
Yeah, everything you said also applies to other vendors. I mean, the
Mm.
amount of times I've seen folks go from ESP to ESP to ESP, not realizing none of them are going to work because your data is not wrangled, is not hygienic. You just keep lifting and shifting to each new platform. And that's why every single time it's going to be a failure, because there was a flaw in the original logic. It's like base code. If there's a flaw in the very original piece, it's going to disseminate everywhere. You have to go to the root of the matter. And to your point, is it politics? Is it outdated infrastructure? Is it actually a philosophical thing of just we like to try new things every couple years just because we get bored and need to have a reason to exist? And so there's a lot of different ways to think about it, but I wouldn't limit the concept and the thought to just CDPs because it's applicable everywhere.
Mm. And lucky last is our confession corner. Jacqueline, what is the confession corner? Tell us about it.
It's the place to just get it off your chest. I mean, the amount of times I have conversations with folks and they just need to tell someone, because if they tell someone at their company, there's maybe consequences or they might get caught at something. And a lot of these mistakes, whether it is you sent the wrong link or you forgot to send it at the correct time, like things happen and like you can mess up an import and you have to completely set up a workflow to revert some of the changes you made on accident. And not everyone needs to know that unless it causes a further downstream problem. Of course, you need to alert your stakeholders and fix and address. But sometimes you just gotta tell someone, like, I massively messed up.
And I love this confession from Stu Pokey. Recently forgot to send an email at the right time because I forgot about it until 7 p.m. Sent it then. Luckily, the metrics didn't change. And I think he was probably sweating because often, when you're running high volume campaigns, if you risk the deadline, the whole thing can fall down. The whole schedule can fall down because then customers get two emails at the same time, And for folks that are like right on that edge where they're like every campaign's going out every day and they're on that, it can be quite challenging. So thanks, Stu Pokey, for that. And that wraps us up for another episode of Making Sense of Martech. Check out
Sure
our
does.
latest episodes and our hot seat interviews. And please subscribe at themartechweekly.com/podcast. We'd love to see you there. We'd love to engage with you and keep your questions and your confessions coming thick and fast, folks. We'd love to see you at the industry and stay curious.
All right. Thanks so much.